So, here at the Dirty Side, with Rob Reed alongside us, we are going to take a look at fixing F1. So, forget the show and the wraparound. If the show and the wraparound wasn't there and there was no entertainment on offer other than what goes on the track, we can all probably agree that it's not perfect right now. The new regs have come in, things are trying to settle, but we've taken issue with some of the things that we've seen this season alone. So we're going to take a little meander through some various aspects of what we've seen this year, whether it be looking at the calendar, the tracks, how kind of the race weekend format works in terms of qualification, sprint format, the race itself. Unfortunately, we're going to humor Brian and talk about tires a little bit as well. But we're just going to really look at everything that we think here at the Dirty Side needs fixing in F1. So, Brian, this was your idea. So, to throw you firmly under the bus, do you want to kick us off with kind of your thoughts on how we can fix the calendar?
Yeah, so let's start with something sort of benign, the calendar itself. It is crazy today, the way we zigzag across the world, weekend to the next. I know we want more races. Most fans do. A lot of people don't. But so to me, let's just cut the calendar into quarters. 2 quarters before the summer break, 2 quarters after, 6 races a quarter, 6 times 4 for everyone who's math challenged, 24 races a year, no more. And some of them may have 5, but then make them into segments. Middle East and Asia, Australia to start Q1. Go to Europe Q2 as it warms up. Summer break, Q3 Europe, and then the Americas, and end it in Brazil. And yes, you can put a little bit of change in there. It doesn't have to work that way, where it's just solely segmented like that. But to me, lower the environmental aspect of doing this. Lower the drain on the teams who have to do this so they don't have to travel as much and as far. I would like to see the calendar aligned a little bit by geography. And so to me, that's the first part I would say is how can we make the calendar flow a little better from a geographic perspective? And then my last piece on this is come up with a core and rotation type approach for tracks. Find the core tracks who are always going to be part of this, the spas. Find the Brazils. Find you can make an argument, Singapore. I love Japan. You got to have Suzuka. I mean, like some of these ones you have to have on. But then some of them have been not as conducive with racing with modern cars, the Mexicos. The conversation we've had about some of the other tracks, like what we did with Paul Ricard came off. I would say there are tracks like South Africa and Malaysia and Mugello who we could add back. And I'd love to see them in the rotation. So, A, go to quarters. Try to tie it to geography, and then B, I'd like to see some tracks put on forever, and then some know that there'll be a rotation through those regions. So that'd be my perspective on calendars and tracks. Mr. Reed, any thoughts from you?
I mean, those are all great ideas. I can't even, I would definitely not disagree with any of that, actually. It all makes complete sense. But like, as you know, like when it comes down to logistics and the different interests that are involved in creating the calendar, I'm sure there's a lot of compromise that goes on behind the scenes,
and money and a lot of money that talks about where people are on the calendar. Abu Dhabi pays to be last.
It might just be not viable.
That's the issue, is that I don't think you'll ever get away from at the FIA accepting the big bucks, or Liberty, or whoever all then the money goes to for the being last, being first. That's always going to be a bit of a bidding war. But then I agree, the rest of it I think could follow it. I do like the idea of the track rotation, because I do miss some of the ones that kind of we don't go to anymore. This artificial kind of high bidding, locking in for like 10-year contracts. We haven't even been to Vegas yet, and Vegas might be an absolutely amazing race, but if it's garbage, they've got a contract for 10 years. Which seems insane that it's already been extended before we even raced there. So having like the ability to bring back, Hockenheim, kind of various different tracks around Europe that we could cycle in and cycle out. Again, I don't know if the money allows that to happen. Do some of these circuits rely on the F1 cash to be able to survive from year to year and couldn't afford a year out? They pay a premium, but they also get obviously the tourism and everything else into the area. So
yeah, but at the same time, there's a lot of memes that go around. We race for money. I mean, there's enough now. The valuation of F1 is high enough where they could make sure this worked and that tracks didn't go under if they wanted them in the rotation. It could go both ways in my mind in terms of helping the tracks be there in the rotation, but
don't want to burn all our time talking about logistics and calendars. That's pretty dull. So let's get into fixing Well, I was going to say fixing qualification, but let's actually throw at the same time. Let's hit two things together because I think they're intrinsically linked. Let's talk about the qualifying format, but also the qualifying format within the sprint weekend as well. Let's kind of try to hit the two things together if we can. Um, First off, Brian, qualification in a sprint weekend. Do you like it being on a Friday?
Well, first of all, if we're stepping back for a second, sprint weekends go by. So
No, no,
that's
no, no, no,
yeah, yeah,
no, no,
yeah.
no.
I
No,
would turn sprint weekends into only for reserve drivers, and
well,
I
then
would
it's not.
make.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. So you're agreeing. Hang on, then.
Hang
So
on, if
okay,
we have to keep it, if we have
let's
to
hit
keep,
sprints first, and let's get back into qualifying after. So sprint formats. We said on the pod recently, actually myself and James Coker, we agreed, which is that I wanted to see sprint. I'm happy with a sprint format to give me extra racing. I don't like it counting towards the World Drivers' Championship, so I'd like to see a separate sprint championship set up. And really, I think we could probably. I don't know whether cost allows them to carry two reserve drivers, but if not, then it's a reserve driver only maybe event.
yes,
So that the main drivers don't have to worry about damaging their car. It can be running the test car, the third car, or what have you. But I like sprint races. I like the sprint. I like extra racing. I just don't like the way it counts towards the drivers' championship at the moment.
see, if I had my way, I would get rid of it. But if we had to keep it for money, one a quarter, so four total in my quarter system. You use reserve driver only, and it's no drivers' championship points awarded, but you can get constructors' points. And so now it's a risk of using the car they're going to use on the weekend for the reserve driver to get some constructors' points. And I would lower the points. I don't like 8 points being awarded on this superfluous demonstration.
If it
I
doesn't
would go
count towards
3-2-1, back to what it was last year.
Oh, you're so wrong.
I'm so
What's
right.
the point of
This
doing it
is
four
such a
times
good
a
argument.
year? Just do it every race, but don't have the
Why?
main drivers. Just
What?
reserve drivers only. Have a sprint
No.
championship.
No.
You're a
no.
free practice fan, aren't you?
No, I just think if you're going to do this, it shouldn't be with the main drivers for points. You're just
Agree.
inflating Red Bull's point
No,
total,
agree.
Max's point total, because they're too good.
So do it every race, but as a separate championship, and then it doesn't impact anything.
What is that championship for? Just giggles and other things? I mean, that doesn't make a lick of sense. Reserve drivers, no drivers championship, just constructor points, and then see who wants to go out. If you want to put Liam Lawson or Daniel Ricciardo in Max's car and risk crashing it the day before, see if they do it.
Rob,
Well,
come and
I asked
talk some
Valtteri his
sense.
opinion. I asked Valtteri his opinion on the new format. He likes the new format better than the old format. And I like that qualifying on Friday determines the grid on Sunday. Like I didn't like that the sprint determined the grid for Sunday. So I like
Yeah,
a quali,
100%.
right, to determine the grid. That should be consistent. Because then there was all this kind of thing about like, oh, did he get pole position or no? Like, was it an actual pole position? Because we're keeping pole position stats here, guys. Like they go back, 50 years or whatever, 70 years, right? So we need to keep that intact. But I was like, you know what? But like I said, but isn't it just like a lot of pressure? Like you got a quali on Friday, then you got another quali on Saturday, then you got a sprint race. And he's like, yeah, it is, but like it's not every race. It's only like so many times a year, so it's okay. I'm good with it. So that was kind of Valtteri's take on it.
I guess
So I'd go. My final proposition then, and you can carry on disagreeing, Brian. It's fine. Is that I'd be doing it every race. I'd be doing it doesn't count towards it's a separate sprint championship. Now I know that maybe doesn't, and I'm part of an American podcast, and obviously American sport doesn't understand this idea of having two championships in play at the same time. Whereas like
Nope.
every other sport around the world, you'll have. James Coker referenced the fact that he wanted it like the FA Cup or the League Cup, which obviously you glazed over at, Brian, because you didn't know what he was talking about.
Nope.
But it's two tournaments that happen in parallel to each other, two different champions at the end. So anyway, I would have sprint championship. You use the third car, the test car, so you don't have to worry about this nonsense. It doesn't count towards constructors. You have two. You have a sprint champion constructor, sprint champion driver. It's reserve drivers only. That way they're ready to rock in the event they're needed. We get something to watch. The drivers don't have to worry about being involved in stuff they don't want to be involved in. And maybe just to go to Valtteri's suggestion, if it was every race, then maybe 4 of the races a year, they can decide to let one of the main drivers have at it as well if they really want to get a little bit of sprint under their skin. But I don't see the point. For me, you're either all in or all out. I like
And
it.
I'm
I'd
all
be
out.
all in. I don't get doing 4 of them. I don't see the point.
I would
For
be
me,
all
for
out.
me, just in general, for me, like the biggest moment for me in Formula One is lights out. Like lights out is what I look forward to most in
Yeah.
F1, right? And with the sprint weekend, you get 2 lights out moments. So like I'm just like all for that. Like I love that. I
But
thrive on
wouldn't you
lights
be
out.
for it if it were reserve drivers as
Sure, yeah,
well?
yeah.
So
It's
that's what I'm saying.
yeah,
If we kept it,
yeah,
I would make
that's
it
fine.
only reserve drivers. I would only make it 4 times a year, personally, and then I would not have it count toward drivers' championship at all, and no separate championship. Just add it to constructors' points. Well, if you didn't like that idea, I don't think you're going to like my quality idea much more there, Vale. So I have a couple suggestions, and I'm actually going to carve this up in a traditional approach and then a more aggressive approach. So number one, my traditional approach, which I think may go over. Let's keep the 3-section quality we have now, Q1, Q2, Q3, but let's shorten it because I liked the shorter phase we saw in the sprint shootout just recently. So 18 minutes becomes 12 in Q1, 15 becomes 18 is 15, 15, 12, 12, 8. I would shorten the times of quali. And here is the point. Add back that whatever tire you use to get into Q3 has to be the tire you start the race on. There's no strategy involved in quali at this point, and it doesn't trickle over to the race, and it should. So that would be what I would do traditionally. My aggressive one, I think you might like this one, I'm not sure. I want to go back to an old one-lap quali shootout. They used it for a couple years, a handful of years ago. One-lap shootout. You get a warm-up lap, put in your lap, and then an in-lap. It's run in the reverse order of the championship, so Max would be going first. Other teams will have the time to beat. The track will get a little bit more rubbered in as the people at the back of the championship go. And again, the tire you use is the one you have to start the race with. So now it's a gamble. Does Red Bull go out on a soft to get pole position? They don't know. It puts a lot of onus on strategy. So I'm done. Feel free to shoot your arrows at me now, Robs.
Well, I will let Mr. Reed go first on this one.
No, I mean I support anything that is going to mix up the starting grid. So like having Max go first, and then because that's what Valtteri was waiting for in quali, and he got screwed by Leclerc's crash. Like he was waiting for the last second to go out with the track maximally rubbered in and cooling down. Like that's what was happening during quali in Miami, and he was going to get that one last chance to try to get it on the P4, right? And of course, it got ruined. But yeah, but the only reason Miami was interesting was because Max was out of position in quali, and so he had to fight his way through. So anything to do to kind of like force a little mix up of the grid and force overtaking, absolutely for that.
Yeah, I mean, actually, I would. The only thing I would fix about the amount of time, I don't really care how long they give for Q1 and Q2. I think you should stick with the Q1, Q2, Q3. And I'd like to see Q3 go to single lap shootout for everybody. And again, in reverse order of the championship, reverse order of the previous race. I don't really care, but I agree that the fastest goes first. And then what I think would be great is everybody gets their moment in the sunshine in quali. Sometimes we don't see some qualifying laps. Sometimes people get stuck in traffic and have a great qualifying lap ruined because of some traffic. Whereas if you did, everybody goes out one at a time in that reverse order. Max goes out first. It's all eyes on him to see what he can do. Next driver
just
out, next
Q3,
driver out.
just the 10 who make Q3.
Just Q3.
Okay.
So I do Q1 and Q2 like I always have. Whoever is the final 10, because you wouldn't trying to do like all 20 cars.
But if they only get one lap, that's the whole quality.
Yeah,
that was
I like
that. One lap. Do or
Q1,
die.
Q2, and then Q3 is your single shot of your top 10.
And what about tires? You don't care? Let them use
I don't care what you do with tires. It really doesn't interest me at all.
I'm flexible on the approach. I like the idea of the 3, sort of segments. I'm fine having just the third be the single lap. That would be exciting and some amazing TV and put the pressure on people to get it right once. But I'd like to have some strategy in quali.
Yeah.
And so to me, I would make a compound choice. Yeah.
And this is kind of like to my, future point that I'm going to make, but yeah, anything that forces more strategy, more decision making, more data analysis, I'm absolutely for, because that can it's kind of like, again, like you've got driver skill, you got car performance, you got strategy. Those are the 3 things that determine, who wins, right? And the driver skill and the performance of the car are pretty set. Strategy is really the big variable. So
the good news is Dirty Side of the Track with Brian and Rob. We don't even have to change anything. It's just a new host. Veils out, reads in. Rob Vale, how about you, man?
The way you're going with your crazy ideas, it's going to be Rob and Rob at the Dirty Side of the Track. I'm telling you, it's you're talking all manner of crazy nonsense. But
Vale,
anyway,
what would you change for the race? Anything?
Well, before we get there, just to finish this one, is the reason I don't think I care about the tyres in quali is because we're going to come on to tyres in a minute. And I think if you got that aspect right and change the way tyres are going to be used in a race, I don't care how you can force strategy or you can make strategy come in a different way than some arbitrary, stupid rule in qualifying. I want to see everybody's hottest, fastest lap in qualifying. I don't want some rubbish lap done on a set of scrub mediums because of strategy. I want to see fastest, purest run to pole on qualifying. Now, I agree. I want to see strategy in the race. I'm sick and tired of what we've seen this year of one stops, of hards for 70, 80% of the race, then a quick drop onto mediums and done. We're not seeing any pit stop strategies really this year. Miami was kind of okay, I guess, because half the grid split the strategy. So we kind of got to see hard to medium or medium to hard. Woo! But so I think tires, I just want to see. Don't want to see them fall off a cliff and like go to like 4-stop strategies because the tires are falling apart. But I would like to see, and I got no clue if this is even possible, but I'm pretty sure that years ago, the tires would start hitting that edge where all of a sudden people go, tires have gone, they've gone. And now it was a scramble to go, what am I going to do? And they're going to see if I can get through this phase of graining and come back in, or am I going to pit now? These seem to go off so slowly. People are on the radio all the time moaning about the tires going off, and then they'll go and put in a fastest lap 2 laps later. So I want to see the speed of tire degradation be ramped up so that they wear out quicker for each of the compounds. I don't want to make them dangerous and have blowouts or driver safety and that kind of stuff. Just want to see them go off quicker. I want to see the softs go. I want to see, well, actually more. I want to see the hards go fast. They can't last. They can't last 99% of a race and do a one single shot pit stop right on your last lap. It's insane.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. And we were talking a little bit about this before. I also don't want to see blowouts. I don't want to see Max coming down the straight at Baku and lose his rear left tire at 200 and some odd miles an hour. But I would like to see them go off a cliff. We went the wrong direction when Pirelli added the C0 or moved the C1 to the C0 and then put a C1.5 as the C1. Extra hard compounds ain't it. What we need are to be using softer compounds and have higher tire deg. One thing I would say is Karun, and I'm teeing up here, Reed. A lot of people are talking about Karun Chandok talking about using all compounds in a race. I think that is, as you would say, Vale, an arbitrary rule to use compounds to drive strategy. You didn't like it in quali, I don't like it in the race. I would say keep the 2-compound rule as it is. Just make sure that the tires actually degrade a little bit, and people have to be smart with what they do in the race. And as I said, to end my tire note, make the choice in quali important. So I would actually start the tire strategy in quali. But Reed, I know you like all three, right?
I mean, Karun mentioned it, and I've heard it mentioned several times in the paddock. It's definitely a conversation that's happening about basically mandatory 2-stop races. You got to use all 3 compounds. And I think that addresses some of Rob's, concerns that like there won't be tire management anymore. Like you will basically run every compound as hard as you can, as fast as you can, because you know that you're going to have to stop twice. You're gonna use the life out of those tires a lot faster, and like the amount that goes into strategy goes up exponentially, right? When it can be a 1-stop with 2 compounds, and every race now is a 2-stop minimum. That's going to throw the strategist I'm going
to sign and get aboard and buy a ticket for the Rob Reed hype train, actually, because thinking about it, my problem with my thing about make the tires go off is what we'll actually do is we'll go back to, what was it, mid-2000s, where we got too many tire management races where nobody was pushing hard because they were trying to extend the life of the tires to the utmost degree. You're right. If you force everybody to have an extra pit stop, or you find a way of doing that so that people have to drive the hell off the tires, they'd never go into tire management mode because they don't need to, which is the most boring aspect of a race where no one's pushing because I've got to conserve my tires. It's just kills the drama. We often talk on the podcast about mid-race lulls where everybody's just in tire management mode, and it's just pointless.
I mean, I get your points.
Head, yeah, Brian. Come on,
Brian. Your points. Well, first of all, by the way, just to play the defense counsel here. You first said make the tires go off faster, and now you're saying just use the hell out of them. So which is it? In
Well, no,
in my
I'm
mind,
saying I'm
no,
quite
no, no,
happy
no,
to just my
still-
opinion.
I have the
Solve that.
floor. I have the floor. And so what I would say is, in my mind, just keep it as it is in terms of the rules during the race. Put some of the jeopardy into qualifying, but make the tires softer. I think there's a talent. Here's the last thing I'll say. I think there's a talent in being able to manage your tires. And I'd argue Checo has made his name being able to manage the hell out of his tires through a race. And so,
Managing tires. Oh, why don't we just go and watch snail racing?
well, what are you looking for? I mean, at the end of the day, people who can get
I'm
the
looking
most out of their
for
car without
full
breaking
gas all the time. Like every driver should be pinned the entire race. Like they shouldn't be like, oh, I gotta manage my tires. I gotta do this. They should be
And
absolutely
I think you can.
going
I think
for
you can
it.
find that edge of the most speed you can get without burning the hell out of your tires. I mean,
Yeah,
you're just
without
allowing.
Alonso like watching TV and giving his like teammate, notes.
But he was
like
watching
that's-
Lewis's rear tires as well. Alonso is a genius.
Alonso was
Yeah,
just cruising. Like he was.
Yeah.
He was checking out stuff on Amazon as well on his app.
That shouldn't happen. That should not
No.
happen.
Good point. So, anything you guys would change in the race itself other than tires? I have a couple that I would add. I would
No,
want
no pitting under safety car.
interesting. No pitting under safety car.
It used to be a rule. It used
So
to be a rule.
VSC as well.
No, VSC. I think. Yeah, I don't think VSC is necessary. But like, yeah, when safety car comes out and you get a free pit stop, some people benefit, some people don't. It's just like it's a very arbitrary advantage that certain drivers and teams get awarded based on where it happens, when it happens, and so I think they used to do the rule was like the pit lane was closed initially until the pack is bunched up, and then the pit lane opens when you're not actually getting an advantage.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I think you could pit, but it was like you say, until the pack had bunched and you didn't get that free pit stop. Because if you do want to maintain some strategy, safety car is great for jumbling the race back up again, purely because of the fact that it concertinas everybody back together and we're going to get a restart. So I like that aspect of safety car, that we get that. I can't remember who we were talking to before that didn't like the fact that if I built up a 30-second lead, then a safety car comes out, we should reinstate all the leads prior to the safety car. Nah, I quite like the whole kind of it all bunches back up again. It's part of the jeopardy of the sport. But the free pit stops, I agree. The only way that I think you run into a problem with that, and maybe the FIA would have to police it to decide what deemed dangerous, is that if the safety car comes out, and I then go and get a puncture by driving over some nicked debris, and I've got my tire flapping around everywhere. But the pit lane's not open. Have I got to like carry on trundling around in a dangerous car, or should I be allowed to pit if it's obviously a safety concern? I mean, that's the only thing.
It used to be a rule, so I'm sure they had that in place. Some kind of exceptions for damage and stuff like that.
I think that's great in terms of minimizing the fluctuation of when people get lucky or unlucky. I have 4 little ones here because I actually think the race itself is pretty great as it is. So 1, I just want people to be okay finishing under a safety car. Those are the rules. If you get near the end of the race and there's damage, everyone freaks out. They don't want to finish under a safety car. We saw this in Australia. Just finish under the safety car like we did in Italy a couple years ago. To me, that's the way the cookie crumbles sometimes. 2, I'd like to have fastest laps count a point for anyone regardless of where you are. If you're outside the points, this is a little crazy, you could still get the fastest lap. I'd like to see cars in the back maybe pit for some soft tires and go for it the last couple laps. That would make it incredibly entertaining at the end if Red Bull's riding off into the sunset. Maybe a little dangerous. I don't know. These are just ideas. 3,
no, I mean, before number 3, hold the press. For the first time in this entire segment, I am all aboard the Brian train because
Choo-choo.
I think when the front is kind of locked and loaded and there's some people that are lapped towards the back and, let's say De Vries is trundling around in his Williams and he's got nothing left to play for other than maybe data for the team to analyze and help fine-tune performance for the next race and all that kind of stuff. If he could go and throw a set of softs on, just go for it. And if by some massive stroke of luck he nails a lap together and gets a crucial point on the board for both himself and Williams, I think that suddenly makes the back of the pack so much more interesting.
He races for AlphaTauri now. You're thinking of Monza last year, but that's okay.
Yeah, well, whatever. It's, whatever, Trevor.
I agree. So I'm happy you agree. Reed, you okay with this potentially?
I'm on board.
All right, so here are my other 2. These are a little crazy, and I'm going to let you guys beat them up, but I'll do them fast because these are a little out there. 1, I'd like to have drivers be able to talk to their teammates during the race as well, not just the pit wall teammates. No one else, but teammates, because I think the in-car Aston Martin radio right now would be chef's kiss. And then the last thing is, I would be interested, and we talked about this on a pod previously with Molly. What if we had a push to use DRS kind of approach? And so it's not push to pass, it's just DRS straights, but you can only use a certain amount of them. And I think it would be kind of interesting from a strategy perspective. Again, this is a little out there. I'm not sure on this one. This is kind of just bouncing around. But if you had one a lap, 57 laps of the race, you have 57 times, even if there are two zones, it means someone else can use it on you in a zone when you're not using it. So, and you don't have to be within a second of anybody. You just want DRS, boom, you could hit it. Just an idea. It's rough, but you get where I'm going.
No, it's not. It's not. I had a huge rant on an episode recently where I said just get rid of DRS out of F1 altogether. It's just, it got introduced in an era to try to help better racing in an era where there was so much dirty air you couldn't get into people's slipstream to try and overtake. So we just had processional race after processional race, and it did a job. It came in, it helped overtaking. The new cars, it's just too overpowered. So for me, I either want to see it gone and we go back to drivers having to earn their right to pass through skill and obviously their car as well, or like you said, let's bring strategy into it rather than two arbitrary lines or three arbitrary lines on the floor and a 1 second thing that might get you to overtake someone. Let them use it a certain number of times. Like when we've seen Red Bull absolutely powering it. And this isn't, I'm not having to go at Red Bull. They've done a phenomenal job to make a better DRS system than anybody else and should be applauded by it. But a couple of times we've seen, if I'm as a driver in front who's trying to defend and keep the lead of a Grand Prix, if I could activate DRS when he's coming after me, I could try and get away from him using DRS. I think that adds an extra dimension to DRS where it can be used strategically rather than so far. I can't remember the stats. I'd have to look it up. But the percentage overtakes this season that are solely DRS enabled is insane. It's absolutely insane. It's like drivers aren't even bothering trying to look for the send it up the inside at the crazy overtaking spot. Just wait till I'm in the DRS zone. I'll just breeze past. So I'm not a DRS fan at all. Mr. Reed?
Well, I don't, the intent of DRS was certainly not to give one team an advantage over another team. So like that needs to be rectified because Red Bull's DRS is so much more powerful than everybody else's on top of having the car that's most powerful. Right. So it's just like, it sways the advantage even more in Red Bull's favor. So, we got to figure out some way to fix that if we don't completely do away with DRS, which I would agree with Rob at this point. It would either be worth getting rid of it completely because the cars just don't need it anymore, or, Brian, I like your idea of kind of like randomizing it and almost making it like a Mario Kart type thing. Like you hit the DRS and maybe it opens or maybe it doesn't. It's just it's like randomized,
like Max's from a few years ago. I've hit it 50 times, mate. Is it open?
So they're hitting it every single time they hit the DRS. Like the drivers are just hitting it, and sometimes it opens, sometimes it doesn't.
Oh man,
I think that's a little bit of a stretch, that one, but I like your style. I like the out there thinking. Just quickly to put a bow around this one about the flag. You were talking about the VSCs and the safety cars. I'd also like to see some kind of standardization of response times to these things. Like which race? It was a couple of races ago, wasn't it, where they put the VSC out, I think, for a while, and then it was always isn't it? And then it was red flagged, and I think George got screwed by pitting while he thought it was going to be a cheap pit stop. Right. I'll take advantage of this. Popped in, came out, then it gets red flagged. It's like, you must have known. Like, hold off on the safety car announcement or whatever you're going to do. We've seen it.
No, they need to make quicker red flag decisions, like the Leclerc crash in qualifying. If they had made the red flag decision just a few seconds faster, they could have restarted the session. But they waited too long, and it counted down, and then they had to stop the session. So like they got to get better at communicating. Like, okay, safety car, possible red flag coming. Like they got to be able to communicate that pretty quickly, so teams can make decisions on that information.
Because if we want strategy. And I do like strategy. So while I sometimes get a little bored of Brian's tire speeches, I do like strategy. But yeah, how can the teams plan for it if there's this kind of what feels like sometimes a little Wild West approach to it's a safety car. And then like 3 laps later, actually, it's a red flag. It's like, come on, you've got enough cameras, enough decision makers that know these things inside out that must be able to say, I like that actually, Rob. We're going to call a safety car, but there's a high chance this is being up to a red flag. All the teams are going to then go, well, we've now got information that we're armed with. We could still gamble and maybe it won't go red. But yeah, I like that.
So then,
What
shall
else
we
we got?
move to the teams? Any last items on teams? I have two, but I'd like to go last because one of them's out there. So, Rob, anything on teams or miscellaneous items we haven't covered you'd like to hit?
I got one miscellaneous item, and I don't even know if this is possible, but I honestly hadn't realized. I know people kept talking about how much bigger the cars have got. And I saw an infographic the other day that kind of showed everything from like the 1950s up to now. And they are driving buses around the circuit now. I mean, in comparison to the sizes of bygone eras, I honestly thought that like Schumacher's car of the early 2000s wasn't really much different to the Ferrari you see Charles in now until you see the size comparison. I'd like to see the regs tighten up to reduce the size back down again, because I think some of the lack of overtaking we get is because you just can't get two cars around some of these corners. It's just and I don't think
Yeah,
it would
the old cars were go-karts compared to today's cars.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know you've got to make sure you're balancing the safety
Right.
element with it, but I can't believe they've grown to this size purely out of safety. That something doesn't feel that they need that much car now to be this safe, especially with the technology, with the kind of the structure of the cars these days can take so much more force. So yeah, that would be my thing. I'd like to see the regs maybe go after car size a little bit.
I think that's a good one. So here were the couple I had. I'd like there to be no in-season silly season. Like the NBA has free agency after the season, and it's a fun time in and of itself. Formula One's trying to find a way to make the calendar longer. Well, here's how you can do it. You don't have to add races. Move the driver market into after the season. You can do that. If free agency starts at midnight, a week after the last race, and then they can sign and do whatever. There are tampering rules in effect like there are in the NBA. I just don't like it. It's so unsettling to have lame ducks driving around for half a season at a constructor. So for me, I'd like to see silly season moved to after the real season. And here's the one that is Rob didn't like that one. You're really not going to like this one. I'd like to see if we could add at least one, if not two teams to the grid. So 2 drivers a team, just like it is now. Let's go to 11 or 12 teams. You pay your dues, which they need to settle on in the Concord Agreement. Don't do it and then come back and go, oh, God, we're valuable now. We don't want Andretti because we want to raise the price. But allow teams to get in. And here's where it gets a little more, this is a little out there. I'd like to have the last team each year removed and open that spot up for competition and have trials 1 month before testing where the fastest one lap gets in the F1 season for the next year. I think this would be great. There's no relegation.
Gosh.
The team is out. You got to have money, and there's so much money in the world, man. People will find the money. So I'd like to have one team a year relegated to no man's land and have a trials 1 month before season testing starts. One driver, one car, one lap. Here you go. You're in or you're out. I know you
shouldn't be drinking at this time of day. That's awful. I mean, you started off so strongly because I didn't get to say my last bit on the car size one is that once the cars are smaller, then you're not going to need as much space. Maybe we can go back because a lot of those pit lanes can support more than 10 teams. Back in the day, there were more than 10 garages. And I'd love to see 12 teams on there. And I think if the cars are a bit smaller and we can get that back on there, that'd be fantastic. That relegation idea sucks and doesn't make any sense in the real world. You're going to have entire teams that don't know. If you're working for a team down the bottom, what you're going to be sacked at the end of the season because the team won't have any money coming in for next year.
Yeah, it's not like you can go to IndyCar or something like that.
Yeah,
there isn't another league to go to.
Yeah,
I didn't say I thought this idea all the way through. And that's how we do it on the dirty side.
And
more teams, though. Yes, more teams. Yeah.
More teams. You could decide that there would be only the top. If there's 12 teams, there's 24 cars. You could say that race day can only have 20 cars in it. So qualifying has got that extra jeopardy of 4 slowest cars can't race on Sunday, or bottom 2. Some kind of jeopardy there at least. I like that idea of there is some jeopardy for the worst teams maybe, but kicking them into touch at the end of the season feels a little harsh.
That one may be a little tough. Anyway,
but I think, across all of those items, we've learned a few things. A, we don't agree on anything. So we are not in any position to fix F1. We've come into the beginning of this segment saying that we're going to fix F1 as the dirty side here. And I think that if you actually gave it to the 3 of us to do, we would fix nothing because we'd spend all our time arguing.
If you used all my ideas, it'd be perfect, but that's okay.
But all we've talked about is like the sport aspect, which is the only thing that actually needs to be fixed. Like I'm like on the entertainment side, let them experiment, let them try new things, let every venue be different in terms of the entertainment value.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, like that's like that is what Liberty Media is for right now, for the most part.
100%, and it will be intriguing to just see what kind of a show Vegas puts on later in the year, and then even more intriguing to see the backlash to it in the comments afterwards. But yeah, I think okay, I think we've done a good job there. I think maybe if you cherry pick some of the ideas and somebody else with more knowledge than us three kind of came on and picked the best bits out of those three, then yes, maybe here at the Dirty Side we have just fixed
Gold,
F1.
Jerry Gold.